Tonight we step quietly into the ruins of Nippur, where, during excavations more than a century ago, archaeologists uncovered a broken clay tablet carrying one of humanity's oldest flood traditions. It is not a grand monument. It is not a polished royal treasure. It is a damaged piece of brown earth, small enough to rest beneath museum glass, yet large enough to hold a vanished world within its marks. The Penn Museum preserves this tablet today under the catalogue number CBS 10673. Scholars identified its writing as Sumerian, copied during the Old Babylonian period, long after the oldest cities of southern Mesopotamia had already risen from the marshes. The surviving text speaks of humanity, sacred authority, cities established before a devastating flood, and a ruler who stands at the edge of destruction. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And, as the night settles around you, post your location and your local time somewhere. Another listener may be entering this same ancient silence beneath an entirely different sky. You find yourself standing where Nippur once breathed beneath the heat of the plain. The air smells of dust, dry reeds, and sun-warmed clay. Far away, water moves through low channels, sluggish and shining beneath a pale horizon. Sand presses softly against your sandals. Nothing here announces that a secret waits below. Nippur was not merely another settlement scattered across ancient Sumer. It was a sacred centre, respected by kings who controlled other cities and carried other crowns. Its temples gave weight to authority, because the god honoured there was understood to possess the power to confirm rule itself. A king might command soldiers and grain, but Nippur offered something quieter and more enduring legitimacy. Among its buried walls, American excavators working for the University of Pennsylvania recovered thousands of tablets. Most were practical things, concerning property, deliverers, offerings, and lessons written by students who probably disliked exercises as much as students always have. Even in the ancient world, someone had to practice signs, correct mistakes, and endure the solemn disappointment of a teacher. But one fragment was different. It had once formed only part of a much larger tablet, perhaps containing around 260 lines. Now only a portion remained, marked by missing edges and sudden silences. The damage is not a small inconvenience, it shapes everything you can know. Lines begin after something important has vanished. Thoughts end before their meaning becomes safe and clear. You lean closer in imagination, almost hearing the faint scrape of a reed stylus pressed into wet clay. The marks are wedge-shaped, arranged in careful rows, each sign once familiar to a trained reader. To you, they appear like tiny doors set into a wall. To the first scholars studying them, they open slowly, with caution, patience, and disagreement. The tablet begins not with a cheerful birth of civilization, nor with a confident royal boast. It reaches toward a time when the ordering of human life is still being arranged. The surviving words indicate that cities are to be founded and placed beneath divine protection. Names are pronounced, destinies are distributed. Brick settlements appear within a world governed by powers greater than their inhabitants. This is where the unease begins. You might expect the earliest surviving stories of cities to celebrate human cleverness. You might expect proud builders, strong walls, bright markets, and kings praising their own achievements. Instead, the cities in this tablet feel assigned. They are granted. Their existence emerges through decisions made above the ordinary lives of the people who will fill them. Oxford scholars who prepared the electronic translation of the Sumerian flood story describe a sequence of cities named before the catastrophe. The words survive in a damaged but unmistakable pattern. A first city is appointed, then another, and another. The list gathers weight because you already sense what lies at its far edge. The world of those cities does not last. For now, their individual identities remain like lamps seen across dark water. You are not yet walking their streets. You are only watching them appear within the tablet, brick by brick, name by name, in the sacred imagination of a scribe. Each place is given a guardian. Each place belongs within an arrangement that seems ordered, ancient, and strangely fragile. There is something deeply human about the object itself. Clay is ordinary material, pressed from river earth, the same substance used for walls, bowls, ovens, and children's toys. Stone may seem noble, and gold may demand attention, but clay has a quieter talent. Once hardened and buried, it waits. Paper burns, wood rots, clay sleeps. Perhaps that is why this story reaches you at all. The scribe who copied it could never have known that his broken tablet would travel from the soil of Iraq to a museum in Philadelphia. He could never have imagined electric light shining upon it, or strangers studying photographs of its surface across oceans. He wrote for his own world, among people who understood its gods, its cities, and its fearful waters. Yet his world did not preserve the tablet neatly. The earth kept only a wounded remainder. Whole stretches of the story are missing, as though someone has removed parts of a dream just before waking. Modern readers receive foundations without all their explanations, a flood without every reason, and cities whose meaning must be recovered from fragments. Naturally, this has encouraged stranger claims. Some modern enthusiasts gaze upon pre-flood cities and speak confidently of vanished super-civilizations, secret technologies, or visitors from beyond the sky. It is an appealing thought on a sleepless night, especially when a tablet seems to whisper about a world existing before ordinary history began. Ancient clay, however, is stubbornly less cooperative than imagination. The tablet does not present machines, hidden maps, or impossible knowledge. It presents a religious memory of order, kingship, settlement, and destruction. Its mystery is not that it proves fantastic visitors built humanity's cities. Its mystery is gentler and more disturbing. People in ancient Mesopotamia believed civilization itself stood upon an older, ruined foundation. They looked backward and saw not emptiness, but loss. Records preserved by the Penn Museum confirm that the surviving text concerns humans, cities before the flood, their rulers, and the flood itself. That is the firm ground beneath your feet. Beyond it, scholarly discussion remains open. Some researchers see memories of severe river disasters woven into sacred narrative. Others emphasize theology, explaining that the story is less a report of one storm than a meditation on divine order and human survival. You do not need to decide tonight. Instead, allow the broken surface of the tablet to remain broken. Feel the rough coolness of clay beneath imagined fingertips. Listen to the soft movement of river water beyond ruined walls. Somewhere in the darkness, a scribe has recorded a list of cities established before disaster. He does not call them imaginary. He does not pause to explain why their world must end. He simply sets them into clay, and among those fading marks rests a quiet possibility, not yet fully revealed, that one city stood nearest the closing of an age, filled with ordinary lives beneath an unsuspecting sun. While the old world moves silently toward water, the tablet beneath Nipper keeps its silence well. For now, you remain beside it, beneath the museum light and the ancient desert sky at once, watching the first names emerge from the dust, while the missing lines hold their breath. The heat gathers gradually around your shoulders, not as a sudden burden, but as a presence. Beneath your feet, the ground is neither clean sand nor generous farmland. It is dried river mud, cracked into delicate patterns, powdered by footsteps, and bright beneath the relentless sun. A faint smell rises from it, earthy and mineral, mixed with reeds, fish, smoke, and the sourness of standing water. This is southern Mesopotamia, the low alluvial world between wandering rivers and shallow marshes. There are no mountains close enough to promise shelter. There is little stone beneath the hand, almost no good timber within easy reach. The horizon lies open and enormous, interrupted by reed beds, mud brick walls, date palms and raised temple platforms catching the light. Here, human life depends upon water that never behaves politely. Rivers bring life, then shift their beds. Canals nourish barley, then fill with silt. Floodwater renews a field, then consumes a house wall in a single season. Every harvest exists because people learn to guide the river without ever truly mastering it. You walk beside a canal cut through the plain, its surface dim beneath floating weeds. A worker stands knee-deep in brown water, clearing reeds from an inlet with a wooden tool. Nearby, children gather dried dung for fuel, while a woman presses wet clay against a wall weakened by last season's rain. Nothing is wasted here, because almost everything is difficult. The cities rising from this landscape are built largely from the landscape itself. Clay becomes brick, reeds become roofs, baskets, boats, mats, screens, ropes, and writing tools. Bitumen, dark and sticky, seals boats against water. Date palms provide sweetness and shade, though their trunks offer little comfort to anyone dreaming of grand beams and elegant halls. You run your fingers across a sun-dried brick, and its surface crumbles slightly. A city made from clay needs constant attention. Walls lean, foundations soften, courtyards sink beneath new layers of debris. When a house fails, another may rise over it. In time, each settlement lifts itself slowly above the plain, built upon kitchens, doorways, shrines, broken bowls, and forgotten footsteps. A city becomes a memory mound. Archaeologists studying ancient settlement patterns have traced how communities clustered along former river channels and canal systems. Research connected with the University of Chicago has helped reveal a landscape threaded by watercourses now lost beneath dust. What appears empty today was once busy with boats, fields, flocks, warehouses, workshops, and people calling across narrow lanes. In the morning, you hear donkeys complain beside sacks of grain. Their displeasure travels impressively far across flat ground. Fishermen pull narrow craft through reeds, carrying baskets that twitch and glisten. Potters knead damp clay with practiced hands, shaping storage jars large enough to preserve a family's grain, beer, oil, or anxious hopes for winter. The scent of baking bread drifts through a doorway. It mingles with smoke from dung fuel, crushed herbs, river water, and wool drying under sunlight. You pass a small courtyard where barley is ground on stone, the rasping sound steady and familiar. Inside another home, someone pours beer through a long reed straw, avoiding the floating pieces of grain husk. It is a practical solution. Civilization is full of them. The people of this plain do not spend their days pondering whether they inhabit the cradle of urban life. They count rations, they mend nets, they curse mosquitoes, they worry about a neighbour's wandering goat, an unpaid measure of barley, a child with fever, or an irrigation gate opened at the wrong hour. History later turns them into ancestors. At the time, they are simply busy. Yet something new is forming around them. Villages become crowded towns. Temples gather stores of grain and wool. Labour is recorded and distributed. Herds, fields, beer jars, fish deliveries, and offerings require memory beyond conversation. A spoken promise may serve among relatives, but a busy institution needs marks that remain when voices leave the room. You enter the cool shadow of a building where clay rests in neat lumps. A scribe sits cross-legged, his body still while his hands remain precise. He presses the cut end of a reed into the damp surface, turning speech into signs. The tablet may record barley, wool, fish, labour, or land. Nothing about it looks mysterious. That is precisely why it matters. Writing begins here not simply as poetry or prayer, but as control over quantities. Someone must know who received grain, who delivered reeds, how much silver changed hands, and which offerings entered the temple stores. The earliest written world is wonderfully unromantic in places. Eternity, apparently, begins with accounting. The scribes themselves belong to a demanding craft. Their signs require discipline, memory, and repetition. Their tablets preserve lists of professions, animals, plants, vessels, and measures, as though the world can be placed into rows and taught to obedient students. A young trainee may spend long hours reproducing signs, while outside, the river keeps refusing to behave like a tidy list. Among the more charming remains of Mesopotamian literacy are scribal exercises filled with proverbs, complaints, and classroom humour. Some portray students who fear punishment, seek favour, or blame their troubles on poor instruction. The ancient schoolroom, it seems, contains the same mixture of ambition, excuses, and mild panic found in classrooms everywhere. But literacy is never merely playful. A written sign can hold an obligation long after the harvest has vanished. A list can separate those who receive food from those who do not. A temple account can transform human work into measured units. Even a simple clay tablet carries a quiet authority, because it makes memory official. In this river country, memory is fragile without clay. Houses collapse, wooden objects decay, reed boats rot into the mud, floods erase lanes that families believed permanent, speech disappears with the breath that formed it. But a small tablet, baked accidentally in a fire or hardened beneath ruins, can remain in darkness for thousands of years. Scholars continue to debate how much early urban growth arose from irrigation management, temple organization, trade, household enterprise, or the authority of rulers. No single explanation holds the whole plain securely. Water matters, faith matters, labour matters, human cooperation matters, and so does the ability of powerful institutions to claim the harvest of that cooperation. As evening approaches, the fierce brightness weakens. The canal turns copper beneath the lowering sun. Insects begin their thin song among the reeds. Smoke settles above flat roofs, and families gather within courtyards where bowls pass from hand to hand. Beyond them, storage rooms hold grain, workshops hold clay, temples hold offerings and obligations, and beneath all of it lies the patient material of remembrance. You sense how easily a flood story could grow in such a place. Not from fantasy alone, but from the daily knowledge that water creates every field and threatens every wall. Not from terror shouted in the streets, but from a quieter understanding carried within each repaired brick and cleared canal. The plain teaches people to build, record, and rebuild. It teaches them that nothing made from earth is entirely safe from water. Under the fading light, the mud brick city rests beside its canal, alive with ordinary voices, while the river moves nearby with ancient, unreadable patience. Morning light enters the temple courtyard in long, pale bands, falling across baskets of barley and jars sealed with clay. The air carries the scent of warm bread, wool grease, incense smoke, and damp brick cooling within shade. Somewhere beyond the walls, a bronze tool taps against stone, measured and patient, like a distant clock not yet invented. You stand among people who already know how to build, sow, brew, trade, bargain, and complain. They know the weight of grain in a basket, the pull of an oar through canal water, and the relief of shade beneath woven reeds. Yet the tablet does not describe their cities as creations of practical effort alone. Something else arrives. In the ancient lines preserved by Oxford's collection of Sumerian literature, kingship descends from heaven. The crown and throne descend with it, followed by sacred rights and powers that make ordered city life possible. Only then are bricks laid in holy places. Only then are city names proclaimed and their guardians assigned. The language is calm, almost ceremonial. There is no trumpet blast, no trembling crowd, no dramatic announcement shouted from a palace roof. Authority simply enters the human world from above, as naturally as rain falling upon a field. To the scribe, rule is not invented at a meeting. It is delivered, You feel the weight of that idea within the courtyard. A ruler may eat bread, sweat beneath linen, suffer illness, and grow irritated by slow officials. He is human enough in body, yet his office belongs to a different order. He does not merely possess power because he gathers armed men or controls grain stores. He occupies a position believed to have existed before him, waiting like a throne in darkness. A procession moves slowly through a gateway. Men carry offerings of grain, dates, fish, wool, and beer. A priest lifts a vessel toward the temple entrance, careful not to spill anything upon his robe. Behind him walks an official holding a tablet, because holiness and administration travel surprisingly well together. Even divine order requires inventory. The king is not always present in person. His authority appears through seals pressed into wet clay, through measures collected in storehouses, through labour summoned to repair canals, and through gifts placed before a god. A small cylinder seal, rolled across a lump of damp earth, may show figures approaching a seated deity. It is beautiful, compact, and quietly serious. Such seals are mainstream evidence of administration and hierarchy in early Mesopotamia. Yale University's Babylonian collection preserves countless tablets and seal impressions revealing how authority touched daily exchange. A delivered quantity of barley, a shipment of wool, or a sealed container becomes part of a larger system, where power leaves marks smaller than a fingernail. A city governed in this manner is more than clustered houses. It is a network of duties. Someone cleans the canal. Someone tends temple flocks. Someone shapes bricks for public walls. Someone receives rations, while someone else records their portion. An ordinary worker may never speak to the ruler, yet the ruler's world enters his bowl, his labour, and the tablet listing his name. You pass beneath a doorway where the shadow feels suddenly cool. Inside, a wooden chair rests on a reed mat. It is not a throne covered in gold, because gold is better suited to later imagination than everyday governance. Still, the chair possesses meaning. A person sitting there may judge disputes, receive offerings, approve labour, or hear reports from the fields. To sit is simple, to rule is stranger. The Sumerian imagination does not treat kingship as permanently belonging to one family or even one city. In related ancient lists, kingship moves from place to place, as though the office itself travels while rulers and walls remain temporary. One settlement possesses it for a time, then its turn ends and authority passes elsewhere. This is a peculiar comfort and a quiet warning. Your city may be honoured today, its temple busy, its warehouses full, its ruler praised in songs, yet no clay wall remains forever upright. No throne can be nailed permanently to the earth. Authority descends, settles briefly, then may be lifted away again. One curious tradition gives rulers of the earliest age reigns lasting thousands upon thousands of years. These numbers are not ordinary biography. No aging king sits through 30,000 harvest festivals, patiently hearing canal disputes while his beard reaches the floor. The enormous reigns belong to sacred time, where the distant past expands beyond familiar human limits. Modern enthusiasts sometimes treat those numbers as secret historical calculations, perhaps evidence of impossible lifespans or concealed celestial visitors. The older text is quieter than such confident theories. Its long reigns create distance. They tell you that the first age was unlike the present, vast and unreachable, where kingship stood closer to the divine world than it does in ordinary memory. The serious debate is subtler. Some historians understand these kingly traditions as political theology, crafted to explain why later rulers could claim legitimate authority. Others see the list as attempts to bind rival cities into one sacred sequence, making scattered local memories part of a single ordered past. The clay does not choose one answer neatly. You step back into the bright court, where officials gather near jars sealed with string and clay. The sacred and practical do not seem separated here. A prayer may accompany a delivery. A temple can be a house of worship, a storehouse, a workplace. and a center of influence. The divine order reaches human lives through grain measures as readily as through ceremony. Perhaps this is why kingship matters so deeply within the old story. Without it, people may live and gather, but their world remains unarranged in the eyes of the scribe. With it, cities become named places within a sacred design. Bricks no longer form shelter alone. They form an ordered human landscape, watched by divine powers and governed through appointed authority. As the afternoon grows still, a singer recites praise near the temple steps. His voice moves softly through heat and dust, honouring the ruler as shepherd, builder, protector, and servant of the gods. The titles sound generous, perhaps suspiciously generous. Court poetry has always known which direction the bread arrives from, yet behind the polished praise lies a serious fear. If rule can be bestowed, it can also be withdrawn. If a city receives a place within sacred order, that place is never entirely secure. People may repair canals, fill storerooms, maintain offerings, and obey decrees, but they cannot force heaven to remain pleased. You notice a fresh tablet resting near an official's hand. Its surface is soft, its signs newly pressed, its edges still vulnerable. It records something immediate, perhaps grain or workers, perhaps offerings due at a festival. Still, it belongs to the same habit of mind that preserves the greater story. To write is to insist that order has existed, that it exists now, and that someone will recognize it when today has vanished. Dusk begins to soften the brick walls. The courtyard empties slowly, leaving stray husks, footprints, and cooling vessels behind. Above the roofline, the sky darkens into a deep and nearly endless blue. No crown is visible there. No throne can be seen descending through the evening air. Only the belief remains. Human beings raise the walls. Human hands shape every brick, clear every canal, and carry every offering through the gate. Yet the tablet imagines their ordered world beginning with a gift they did not invent. Kingship has entered the plain from a realm beyond sight, settling among mud walls and grain jars, creating cities that now stand beneath a shadow they cannot yet understand. At the edge of the ancient wetlands, the ground changes beneath your feet. Dry earth gives way to softer patches, darkened by water hiding below the crust. Reeds sway in the light wind, their thin leaves brushing together with a papery murmur. The smell is greener here, carrying mud, fish, wet roots, and the faint sweetness of date palms rising above low houses. Eridu stands close to this watery world, not as a city of towering stone, but as a settlement gathered upon a modest rise. In the 6th millennium before our era, its earliest inhabitants choose a patch of ground above the marshy plain. Around them, shallow water flashes beneath the sun. Small boats slide between reed beds. Birds lift suddenly, leaving ripples where their feet touch the surface. The city is known today as Tel Abu Shahrain, a mound in southern Iraq. Excavations directed by Fuad Safar and Seaton Lloyd uncovered something remarkable beneath its later sacred buildings. Layer below layer, they found a sequence of mud brick shrines rebuilt upon nearly the same sacred spot. The earliest was small and simple, yet its position endured through centuries of careful rebuilding. You step into the imagined first shrine, where the floor is packed earth and the walls remain close around you. There is no gold ceiling, no avenue of statues, and certainly no souvenir stall selling tiny replicas. A niche stands at one end of the room. A raised place for offerings occupies another. Light enters softly, revealing fingerprints pressed into ancient plaster. The building is humble, but the choice behind it is immense. Someone decides that this place matters. Someone returns with bricks when walls fail. Someone remembers where the sacred room stood and rebuilds upon it. Over generations, the shrine expands, becoming more formal, more commanding, and more deeply rooted within the life of the settlement. The Institute for the Study of Ancient Cultures at the University of Chicago has examined the wider culture, connected with Eridu's earliest levels, known through painted pottery, shared customs, and community stretching far beyond a single mound. Their research places Eridu within a long period of experimentation, when southern villages developed new forms of public space, ritual gathering, and social organization. Nothing happens overnight. There is no morning when a fisherman looks up and announces that urban civilization has now officially begun. People arrive, remain, rebuild, and gather. They repair nets, fire pottery, prepare food, and watch children disappear into reed thickets despite repeated warnings. Meanwhile, a sacred centre grows steadily among their houses. Eridu's divine protector is Enki, associated with fresh water beneath the earth, skill, wisdom, and the mysterious abundance sustaining human life. This association feels perfectly suited to the city. You're surrounded by brackish marshland and shifting channels. Yet the imagination of Eridu turns toward hidden sweet water, rising unseen from below and making survival possible. At the sanctuary entrance, water may have carried more than practical meaning. It's just cleansing, renewal, and access to a divine depth beneath the visible landscape. You pause beside a basin, hearing liquid stirred by a passing hand. In a region where clean water is never taken lightly, sacred water carries a seriousness modern comfort can easily forget. Fish also belong to this watery holiness. Archaeologists recovered fish bones associated with sacred activity at Eridu, traces of meals or offerings placed near the shrine. Imagine the smell of roasting fish drifting through evening air, mixed with smoke and river reeds. Religion here is not distant from appetite. It is gathered from the marsh and placed before the divine. A curious discovery deepens that picture. Among the remains of Eridu, excavators found a small clay model of a boat, complete with details suggesting mast and steering gear. It is a tiny thing, almost playful in appearance, yet it belongs to people whose lives depend upon movement across water. Even a sacred city begins with someone needing a reliable boat. Your gaze travels outward from the shrine toward narrow waterways glinting through reeds. Men pole vessels carrying jars, baskets, and bundles of cut vegetation. Women clean fish near shaded walls. Potters decorate bowls with dark painted designs, steadying each vessel carefully upon their knees. Farther away, cattle move slowly through damp ground, flicking insects from their hides. The city does not dominate nature, it bargains with it. A wet season may swell channels and bring abundance. Another may spread sickness, damage stores, or leave homes surrounded by water. A dry year may turn pleasant shallows into cracked ground and dying reeds. Eridu survives because its people understand small changes in water, wind, soil, and season. Their expertise is practical, inherited, and largely silent. As the sanctuary is rebuilt repeatedly, it begins to rise above the ordinary houses nearby. The repeated structures form a memory in brick, each generation placing its sacred building over the remains of one already old. You might feel this almost physically, as though standing upon the accumulated trust of people who refuse to abandon a chosen center. Later, Sumerian tradition remembers Eridu as the first city, the earliest home of sacred order among humanity. That tradition does not prove that every form of settlement began here, because older communities existed elsewhere across the wider ancient world. Yet it reveals how Mesopotamians themselves imagined beginnings. When they searched for civilization's threshold, they looked toward Eridu. Scholars still discuss why this particular settlement gained such enduring prestige. Some emphasize its genuinely early temple sequence and its role within southern ritual life. Others consider its place near marshes, waterways, and ancient exchange routes. It is also possible that later religious memory enlarged Eridu's importance, making a respected sanctuary into the symbolic starting point of everything ordered and human. Perhaps that is how beginnings often work. A place becomes ancient in memory not only because it was old, but because people need somewhere to place the first step. They need a doorway through which the world enters meaning. For the scribes of southern Mesopotamia, that doorway is not carved from mountain stone, it is made from clay beside the water. The sun sinks lower, softening the marsh into bronze and green shadow. A boat returns toward the settlement, its pole dipping with quiet rhythm. Smoke curls above flat roofs. Near the sacred building, someone places an offering and withdraws, leaving the evening air to carry its scent through the enclosure. You remain at the threshold of Eridu, where mud brick, fish, fresh water, and human patience gather into something larger than survival. The city feels less like a monument than a beginning remembered with tenderness and caution. Beneath its modest sanctuary, generations have placed one sacred floor upon another, as though protecting the fragile idea that human life can be ordered at all. In the deepening dusk, the marsh whispers around the mound, water touches reed stems, birds settle beyond sight. The first city rests within its wet horizon, watched by a god of hidden waters, while its people return quietly to their lamps, their bowls, and their sleep. A thin wind crosses the plain, carrying the dry scent of barley straw and distant water. Beneath a sky bleached almost white by afternoon brightness, 5 points begin to gather in your mind. They are not marked by signposts, roads, or walls visible across the horizon. They appear through the careful order of a clay inscription, placed one after another like lamps upon a dark shoreline. The ancient record does not offer an endless catalogue of settlements. It chooses 5. That number gives the list its peculiar force. These are not casual places recalled during a wandering tale. They form a deliberate arrangement, each city receiving a divine guardian, each standing within a world made ready for human habitation. The Oxford corpus of Sumerian literature preserves the sequence clearly enough: Eridu, Bad Tibera, Larak, Sippar, and Shrupak. 5 cities beneath one uncertain sky. The first name is Eridu, placed under the care of Enki, the wise power of sustaining waters. In the imagination of the old scribes, it carries the hush of beginnings. You see low houses near wet ground, reed boats nosing through green channels, and sacred water gleaming inside a vessel. It is not merely a town beside a marsh. It is the first chosen resting place of an ordered human world. Yet the inscription does not remain there. Its attention travels onward, moving inland across the broad and glimmering plain, where irrigation channels divide fields into patient rectangles. You follow in the quiet rhythm of the list, crossing ground marked by cattle tracks and cart ruts, until a second name rises from the clay. Bad Tibera is given to the mistress, a divine lady associated in tradition with brilliance, power, and fertility. The city's name has often been understood as connected with metal workers, suggesting a place of craftsmen and glowing furnaces. You imagine copper-coloured light flickering in a workshop courtyard, while men lift tools from charcoal heat and cool them with a hiss in water. It is an attractive image, though the details remain uncertain. Archaeology does not hand you a convenient street plan labelled with every legendary workshop. The city exists in tradition more confidently than it appears beneath modern excavation. Its possible site has been discussed, examined, and argued over, because ancient names do not always settle neatly upon modern mounds. Still, its place within the tablet feels exact. Bad Tibera is not simply an industrial stop along a trading route. It occupies the second station within a sacred pattern. The craftsman's fire, whether literal or remembered, now flickers inside a world whose cities have each been appointed, as though skill itself belongs to the structure of creation. One odd tradition gives Bad Tibera a connection with a shepherd ruler whose reign stretches through an astonishing number of years. The figure appears in ancient kingly memory with a life far beyond normal human measure. Perhaps the vast number expressed honour, sacred distance, or the dreamlike scale of the earliest age. Ancient accountants were precise, but sacred storytelling could be wonderfully extravagant. Your path continues beneath a rising evening breeze. Loose chaff skitters across a hardened track. Small birds descend upon a field, stealing grain with the confidence of creatures immune to taxation. Beyond the cultivated strips, the third city appears in the sequence, quieter in surviving memory than its companions. Larak is assigned to Pabilsag, a divine figure connected with warfare, judgment, and protective strength. The location of Larak remains debated among scholars, its ancient presence surviving more securely in written tradition than in a universally agreed ruin. You sense a place seen through a veil, a city known because the text insists that it once stood. Perhaps Larak possesses walls thick enough to throw deep shade in the noon heat. Perhaps its gate receives carts carrying grain from surrounding fields. Perhaps armed attendants linger near an entrance, their spears upright and their patience imperfect. These are gentle reconstructions, not facts carved into certainty, because the city leaves its clearest footprint in words. This uncertainty matters. A remembered city can remain powerful even when its streets refuse discovery. The old list grants Larak a position in humanity's first landscape, and that position survives through thousands of years of broken earth and missing evidence. Sometimes a city disappears twice, first from daily life, then from the map, while its name keeps breathing inside clay. The fourth light is brighter. Sipar is placed under Utu, the sun god, guardian of justice and radiant sight. Here the connection feels almost visible. Morning sunlight pours across courtyards, catches the rims of storage jars, and strikes the white plaster of a sanctuary wall. Nothing stays concealed beneath such a gaze for long, at least in the reassuring logic of sacred poetry. Sipar was a real and important Mesopotamian city, known especially for the worship of the sun god. Its remains lie in modern Iraq, and written evidence from the site reveals a long history of temple life, property, trade, law, and learned activity. The legendary list therefore touches a city whose earth and tablets speak with unusual abundance. You approach it in imagination during the early morning, when cool air still clings to mud brick before the sun becomes punishing. Petitioners gather near a temple court. A merchant worries over a dispute. A widow waits with the calm weariness of someone who's already explained her problem twice. Justice under sunlight sounds noble, though cues remain stubbornly human. Sipar brings a different tone to the chain. Eridu holds the mystery of water. Bad Tibira glows with remembered craft. Larak stands dimly behind scholarly uncertainty. Sipar shines with judgment, visibility, and written order. Each city seems to hold one portion of civilized life, as though humanity is being provided with a complete world, piece by piece. This arrangement raises a question scholars continue to consider. Was the list shaped from genuine memories of early sacred centers, gathered into a narrative of ancient origins, or did scribes arrange respected cities into a theological pattern, creating a meaningful landscape rather than preserving a literal sequence of founding events? The tablet remains composed and unhelpful on that point. It gives names, not explanations. Night begins to rise from the canals, the last colour leaves the fields, and low houses become dark blocks against the horizon. Oil lamps appear within doorways, small flames trembling in shallow dishes. The fifth city waits at the end of the sequence, not hidden, yet carrying a heavier stillness than the names that led toward it. Shurapak is given to Sud, a divine lady whose presence completes the chain. Its name settles into the clay with the quiet finality of a door closing. No thunder sounds above it. No warning interrupts the order of the inscription. A city has simply been named, appointed, and placed among the inhabited spaces of the world. You imagine 5 cities now, not isolated ruins, but a sacred geography joined by water, labour, devotion, and expectation. People grind grain within them. Children chase dogs through courtyards. Priests arrange offerings. Boatmen curse submerged reeds. Officials count rations with grave attention, because someone must always count the rations. Nothing in their naming suggests panic. That is what makes the sequence so haunting. The cities are not introduced as guilty places awaiting punishment. They are presented as the proper homes of humanity, established with care and divided among divine protectors. Their canals are watered, their names are spoken, their existence seems settled, complete, almost blessed. And still, the tablet has chosen only 5. Across the darkening plain, their imagined lamps remain steady, each glowing beneath the protection assigned to it. Eridu, Bad Tibira, Larak, Sipa, Shurupak. The names pass softly through your mind like footsteps entering a house at night. They form a world measured, guarded, and quietly enclosed. At the farthest edge of that ordered landscape, the 5th lamp burns without flickering. Around it, people continue their ordinary evening tasks beneath the stars. Water slips along the canal banks. Clay walls hold the warmth of the vanished sun. The city stands exactly where the sacred list has placed it, carrying the last name in a chain whose silence grows deeper with every breath. A river bends through the plain with the quiet confidence of something that has outlived every human plan. Its banks are crowded with reeds, mooring posts, baskets, footprints, and the dark impressions left by boats drawn onto mud. The air carries wet clay, fish scales, smoke, and grain dust. Beyond the water, a city spreads low and broad beneath the sun. This is Shurupak. It does not appear as a dream city hidden beyond the edge of the world. It stands upon the central plain of Sumer, within the reach of boats, messengers, merchants, farmers, temple workers, and officials with an impressive devotion to recording supplies. Its streets are made by feet, cartwheels, spilled water, and the daily pressure of ordinary life. The settlement known to archaeology as Tel Farah once covered a substantial area, beside an ancient channel of the Euphrates. Scholars examining its remains identify it as one of the major cities of 3rd millennium Mesopotamia. Its mound stretches across the landscape like a low earthen island, raised slowly from collapsed walls. Rebuilt houses, rubbish, shrines, and abandoned rooms. You enter through a busy district near the water. Porters move sacks from a boat, their shoulders darkened by sweat. A donkey objects loudly to the weight assigned to it, offering the sort of criticism that no official tablet records adequately. A child runs between baskets, nearly colliding with a woman carrying flat bread from a courtyard oven. The city feels alive because it is useful. It stores food, organizes labor, receives goods, distributes rations, settles exchanges, and sends messages beyond its walls. Mud brick buildings cluster along lanes where dust clings to ankles. In shaded rooms, jars stand against walls, each holding grain, oil, beer, dates, or something a household hopes will last through difficult weeks. Excavations at Pharaoh recovered large numbers of cuneiform tablets from the city's active life. Many concern resources, deliveries, land, household property, and workers receiving rations. The University of Pennsylvania Museum holds important materials from excavations conducted there during the early 20th century, when archaeologists began reconstructing the city from tablets, bricks, seals, pottery, and buried architecture. A city known from sacred tradition becomes suddenly intimate through paperwork. A field is transferred. A quantity of grain is counted. Wool passes from one hand to another. A messenger receives provisions for travel. Such records do not speak with the gentle mystery of a legend. They speak with the faintly weary voice of administration, which may be the most convincing sign that a place was real. You pause inside a storehouse where the light is narrow and golden. Rows of vessels sit along the packed floor. A clerk examines a clay tablet, while another worker presses a seal over a lump securing a container. The seal leaves an image across the damp surface, confirming that someone has inspected, delivered, received, or claimed responsibility for what rests inside. Thousands of clay ceilings were recovered from Shurupak, many bearing impressions once used to secure doors, baskets, vessels, or bundles. They preserve small scenes of authority and movement, figures, animals, patterns, and symbols rolled across clay by people whose names have largely disappeared. Someone shut a storeroom. Someone checked a shipment. Someone suspected that trust alone was insufficient. It is a familiar problem. Along another lane, you hear the rhythmic knock of a tool striking wood. Reed mats hang beside a doorway. Copper catches the sun from a craftsman's bench, reddish and warm against the pale wall. Farther away, a brewer tends jars within a shaded workspace, while the smell of fermenting grain rises pleasantly through the afternoon heat. The divine patroness of Shuruppak is Sud, a powerful goddess later associated closely with Ninlil. Within the city, her sanctuary would have offered a sacred centre among workshops, storerooms, houses, and river traffic. Offerings brought to her were not separate from the city's economy. Grain given to a goddess must still be harvested, carried, measured, and carefully recorded. A mother leads a small boy through a courtyard, brushing dust from his shoulder. Near them, an elderly man rests with his back against a wall, watching labour continue without offering assistance. He has earned that privilege, or perhaps simply claimed it successfully. Over a roof, pigeons flutter down towards scattered grain, entirely uninterested in the city's sacred importance. This is what unsettles you most. Shuruppak is not inhabited by figures who seem prepared for legend. It contains people concerned with meals, contracts, tools, marriages, debts, harvests, bruised feet, noisy animals, and the stubborn problem of keeping a roof from leaking. They inhabit a city remembered in sacred storytelling as standing at the limit of an age, yet their lives would have felt entirely present. Records from the site indicate an organised urban community with relationships extending across southern Mesopotamia. Goods and messages travel outward. Officials maintain accounts. Households manage land and possessions. The city participates in political and economic networks larger than itself. It is not an isolated settlement waiting passively beside a river. It is engaged, connected, and confident. The scribal world of Shuruppak produces another curious treasure, some of the earliest literary and educational tablets known from Mesopotamia. Among practical accounts, there are signs of learning, vocabulary, and instruction, as though the city contains not only warehouses and fields, but rooms where knowledge is trained into patient hands. Somewhere, a student presses a mistaken sign into clay and quietly hopes no teacher notices. A particularly charming oddity from the site is a lamp shaped like a bird, recovered among objects linked with its ancient occupation. It is easy to picture it glowing within a dark room, its little clay form holding a flame while shadows tremble against the walls. Even a city carrying a solemn place in human memory once required someone to design a lamp with personality. Scholars continue to discuss the precise shape of Shurupak's political organisation. Its archive reveals complex administration and extensive connections, yet the relationship between temple authority, household power, civic leadership, and wider alliances remains open to interpretation. The tablets record activities with admirable seriousness, but they do not gather politely to explain the whole constitution of the city. Towards sunset, the river becomes a broad ribbon of bronze. Boats return laden with reeds and fish. Workers move toward homes where meals are being prepared. Smoke rises from rooftops and bends sideways beneath a mild wind. A dog sleeps near a doorway, lifting one ear whenever footsteps approach. Then, deciding that civilization can proceed without its involvement, you climb gently onto higher ground and look across Shuruppak. From here, it is no mysterious symbol. It is brick walls touched by orange light, canal water, storehouses, shrines, workshops, courtyards, and people finishing their tasks. The city is materially real, pressed into the earth through generations of building, trading, worshipping, writing, and resting. Yet its ordinary reality gives its sacred position a deeper chill. A remembered final generation does not need to look unusual. It does not need to gather beneath ominous skies or speak in trembling voices. It may bake bread, seal containers, complain about deliveries, and light a bird-shaped lamp when darkness enters the room. It may believe tomorrow will resemble today, because that is usually what tomorrow does. Night settles across the Euphrates plain. One by one, lamps appear within Shuruppak, warm points among the cooling bricks. The river moves beside the city without explanation, carrying reflected stars in its dark surface. Every lane grows quiet. Every household withdraws into its familiar shelter, and the last city in the ancient sequence sleeps like any city that has never been told what it represents. Night gathers inside the sanctuary long before it settles across the streets. Thick mud brick walls hold back the final warmth of the day, leaving the chamber cool and faintly scented with oil, ashes, and damp plaster. A lamp burns beside a low offering table, its small flame bending whenever air slips through the doorway. A man stands alone in that uneven light. His name is Ziusudra, and the surviving Sumerian account presents him with unusual restraint. He is not introduced amid soldiers, banners, or musicians praising his victories. He appears as king and purification priest, a ruler engaged in reverence, standing humbly before the divine presence and shaping his wishes with care. This detail matters more than any jewel or throne. In a world where authority carries sacred weight, the ruler who matters most is not simply the loudest commander. He is the one expected to listen. He must hear the unease of the gods, the needs of the city, and the quiet dangers gathering beyond ordinary sight. You watch him approach the sacred place without hurry. His robe brushes softly against the floor. His hands carry no weapon. Perhaps an attendant has placed water nearby for cleansing. Perhaps a bowl of grain or a cup of beer waits upon the offering stand. The room is modest, but its silence feels carefully maintained. Ziusudra is not entirely separate from the people he governs. Somewhere nearby, bread is still being prepared for morning. A baby wakes and is soothed. A night guard walks beneath the stars, wishing his shift belonged to somebody else. Yet the king stands within a loneliness that ordinary households cannot share. A ruler is surrounded by people, then left alone with knowledge. The tablet preserved in the Pen Museum identifies Ziusudra as the king who receives the concealed divine decision against humankind. Oxford scholars reading the damaged Sumerian lines render him as a devout figure, one who stands in awe and attends carefully to words delivered from beyond the visible world. The warning does not arrive through public proclamation. No messenger runs into the market. No bell calls families into the streets. No official reads a decree from a platform while anxious citizens exchange frightened glances. Whatever is being decided remains withheld from them. The city continues beneath its familiar sky, while one man is brought near the secret. For a moment, you hear only the lamp. The old poem is damaged around this encounter, and that damaged space adds to its quiet force. Enough survives to reveal a king standing close to sacred communication. Enough survives to show that the fate of humanity is spoken in his presence, but much remains missing, leaving his first thoughts buried in the broken surface of the clay. Did his breath catch? Did he refuse to understand? Did he believe that proper offerings might change the decision? The tablet offers no comforting window into his mind. It preserves duty more easily than emotion, as ancient texts often do. Fear is left to your imagination, which understands it without needing instructions. Ziusudra's name itself carries a curious echo. Scholars commonly interpret it as meaning something like life of long days, or life extended into distant time. It is an oddly fitting name for a man placed within a tradition of threatened humanity. Ancient stories sometimes allow a name to lean gently toward destiny, without explaining whether the leaning is chance or design. He is also remembered in later literary traditions, not merely as a survivor, but as a figure of ancient wisdom. A ruler from the deep past may become more than a political person. He may become a vessel into which later generations pour their questions about obedience, mortality, justice, and the possibility that knowledge can arrive too late for everyone. In the sanctuary, the king lowers his head. You sense that his title offers little comfort now. Being ruler means receiving grain, petitions, gifts, praise, and complaints. It also means being held responsible when channels fail, when stores empty, when enemies approach, or when the divine order itself appears to turn against those living beneath it. There is a gentle cruelty in secret warning. To be told is to be separated. Ziusudra may pass through familiar courtyards and recognize every sound. Yet nothing can remain ordinary once he carries knowledge others do not possess. A laughing household becomes fragile. A busy workshop becomes temporary. A child asleep upon a woven mat becomes almost impossible to look at calmly. Still, the account does not present him shouting his anguish toward heaven. It describes devotion, attention, and humility. This is the mainstream portrait preserved in the ancient text, a pious ruler whose access to sacred knowledge depends upon his reverent posture. The warning reaches him because he belongs near the boundary between divine decision and human life. That boundary is narrow and uncomfortable. Later storytellers across Mesopotamia would reshape the figure of the warned man, changing names, language, and the manner of revelation. Scholars continue to debate how these traditions relate to one another. Some consider them developments of shared storytelling passed among scribes. Others ask whether separate memories of destructive river events became woven into overlapping sacred accounts. The earliest Sumerian figure remains especially quiet. He's not yet surrounded by elaborate speeches or polished literary drama. He stands within damaged lines, almost hidden by the broken tablet carrying his name. His restraint makes him more haunting, not less. He feels like a man seen through a doorway, already burdened by something too large for conversation. Outside, the night deepens. Cool air settles upon flat roofs. A distant dog barks once, then loses interest. Somewhere, a servant shuts a storage room and presses a seal into clay, satisfied that tomorrow's goods remain secure. People rely upon small protections, because those are the protections human hands can manage. Within the sacred chambers, Ziusudra faces threat no door seal can contain. One fringe reading imagines him as keeper of forbidden knowledge, guardian of secrets from an advanced, vanished age. It is an appealing image for anyone who wants the past to contain hidden chambers and impossible answers. Yet the ancient portrait is more intimate. His knowledge is not technological power. It is the terrible privilege of hearing that ordinary confidence may no longer be safe. Perhaps the story gives the warning to a king because rulers embody the whole community. Perhaps it gives the warning to a priest because only ritual purity allows a mortal to hear such words. Or perhaps the combination reveals an older anxiety that when catastrophe approaches, the powerful may learn first, while countless ordinary people remain occupied with supper, wages, and sleep. The tablet does not settle that discomfort. You remain within the dim sanctuary, watching the lamp reduce itself slowly into oil and smoke. Ziusudra neither moves toward celebration nor collapses into despair. He listens. He carries the message inward, into the still place where a person understands that knowledge is not always rescue, and warning is not always mercy. Beyond the wall, the city breathes steadily through the night. Doors are barred. Fires fade. Families rest in the soft confidence of routine. Above them, stars continue along their familiar paths, offering no visible sign that a decision has entered one man's hearing. Ziusudra stands in silence, king among sleepers, priest among shadows, and keeper of a truth that has not yet found its way into the dreams of those around him. Before sunrise, the city is not silent. It is merely softer, as though its many lives are turning beneath a shared blanket. A baby fusses behind a reed screen. A woman coughs beside a cooling hearth. From a nearby courtyard comes the scratch of a broom moving dust, husks, and yesterday's small disappointments toward the doorway. You follow the scent of ash and crushed grain into a narrow house. Its rooms open around a central court, where pale light gathers slowly upon packed earth. A clay oven stands near the wall, still warm from evening use. Beside it, A shallow bowl contains dough prepared before sleep, covered carefully against insects, curious children, and careless husbands. A woman kneels and begins shaping bread between her palms. Her movements are quick, steady, practiced through years no official inscription will praise. She has measured grain, managed jars, watched stores diminish, and learned exactly how much food can be stretched without anyone admitting it has been stretched. A household survives through this quiet arithmetic. Nearby, a girl helps grind barley upon a stone surface. The rasping sound fills the courtyard, regular and slightly wearying. Her arms will ache before the morning meal is ready. She knows which jar holds onions, which basket contains dates, and which small brother must be kept away from the hot oven, because he approaches danger with remarkable enthusiasm. University of Pennsylvania excavations at Shuropak uncovered tablets showing a society organized through households, land, grain, labor, and property. These records confirm that life here depends upon families managing practical obligations inside a larger urban system. The ancient city is not composed only of temples and rulers. It is carried each morning by work performed before anyone important is awake. Outside, the lane brightens into activity. Men lead sheep toward an open area where wool will be sorted and cleaned. A basket maker bends reed bundles against his knee. A potter checks vessels drying in sunlight, tapping one gently and listening for a good sound. The jar answers with a dull note. His expression suggests that clay has disappointed him personally. A young labourer receives a measured ration of grain for work performed on fields owned by a larger household or institution. The payment is modest, but it enters his life immediately. It becomes bread, beer, porridge, or something traded for oil and fish. Great economies are often felt through the small relief of carrying food home. In a shaded room, wool lies in pale heaps. Women twist fibres into thread, their fingers moving almost without pause. Conversation drifts above the work, touching marriages, births, prices, neighbours, and one relative whose visits somehow last longer than anyone expected. Laughter rises briefly, then settles back into the soft pull and turn of spinning. Textiles are among the most demanding products of the ancient city. Flocks must be tended, wool gathered, washed, prepared, spun, woven, and distributed. Records from southern Mesopotamia show many women involved in this labour, sometimes receiving rations through organised institutions. A finished cloth carries countless hours within its folds. Though the wearer may simply admire the colour, you pass a doorway where a boy sits with a lump of damp clay upon his knees. His teacher speaks slowly, then less slowly, because patience has limits in every century. The boy presses signs into the tablet, copying familiar entries from a learned list. His first attempts wobble slightly, and one sign leans as though exhausted by education. Children born into scribal households might learn lists of objects, professions, animals, and measures. Their exercises turn the living city into categories placed in neat rows. A fish becomes a written sign. A wooden tool becomes another. A jar of beer, so pleasant in ordinary life, becomes a spelling problem beneath the stern gaze of an instructor. Not every child enters such a room. Many learn through hands, feet, repetition, and observation. A son watches how his father repairs a net. A daughter recognizes when dough has risen correctly by touch and smell. A shepherd child knows the temperament of animals better than the temperament of adults, which may be the more useful education. Near midday, heat pushes people into shade. The lane empties except for flies, sleeping dogs, and two boys rolling small objects across the ground in a game whose rules seem flexible whenever someone begins losing. Gaming pieces and small toys have been found in ancient Mesopotamian settings, reminding you that children do not become solemn simply because later centuries call them ancient. Within another household, an elderly woman sits on a mat while a younger relative cools her forehead with damp cloth. illness belongs to the city as surely as bread and wool. People know headaches, aching joints, stomach pain, fever, difficult births, and the fear that arrives when breathing changes during the night. Care begins with hands before it becomes an explanation. Healing in Mesopotamia draws upon herbs, washing, bandaging, just prayer, and spoken ritual. A remedy may include ingredients gathered from garden, riverbank, store jar, or market stall. Some treatments would seem sensible to modernize, while others appear strange, involving symbolic actions meant to drive away unseen causes of suffering. Human beings dislike illness most when it refuses to explain itself. One quirky remedy from ancient Mesopotamian medical tradition recommends substances that sound less like medicine than a punishment for asking. Ingredients could include animal products, beer, oils, plants, and unpleasant mixtures applied with solemn confidence. You can almost imagine the patient deciding, after one look at the bowl, that recovery has suddenly become preferable. Across the court, a musician plucks a small stringed instrument while family members prepare the evening meal. Music does not require a festival. It may accompany rest, courtship, worship, mourning, or simple enjoyment after labour. The notes are gentle and spare, moving through rooms where jars line the wall and bread cools beneath cloth. A newly married woman arranges ornaments in a small container. A young man checks a fishing hook. Two sisters divide dates while disagreeing about fairness in quantities so small that only sisters could maintain the argument. A father returns dusty and tired, welcomed by a child who wants attention at precisely the moment he most desires silence. Scholars still examine how much freedom people possessed within households shaped by rank, gender, dependency, and institutional labour. Tablets reveal wages, property arrangements, assignments, and transactions. But private feeling rarely presses itself clearly into clay. A rationalist can show that someone received grain. It cannot easily tell you whether she sang while carrying it home. The city grows cooler when the sun drops. Families spread mats, wash hands, share bread, and drink from jars passed between them. Smoke rises with the fragrance of cooked onions and fish. Voices mingle over walls, creating a soft evening murmur, the sound of thousands of minor concerns receiving their temporary conclusions. There is no reason for these people to think of themselves as a last generation. Their world contains new births, engagements, lessons, arguments, debts, harvest, plans, and roofs requiring repairs. A young mother imagines her daughter grown. A merchant expects repayment. A boy fears tomorrow's writing lesson. Hope often wears ordinary clothing. You linger near a doorway as a lamp is lit. Inside, a child falls asleep against his mother's shoulder, one hand still curled around a piece of bread. Outside, sandals pass along the lane, slower now, carrying neighbours home beneath a sky clear with stars. The river air reaches the courtyards at last, cool enough to ease the day's heat. Perhaps this is the most tender mystery carried by any ancient city. Its people do not live as symbols. They live as people, stubbornly occupied by hunger, affection, duty, discomfort, humour, and sleep. Their lives fill the streets so completely that no distant meaning can be felt among them. Night closes gently over Shurapak. The grinding stones are still, the wool is folded away, a school tablet dries upon a shelf, preserving a student's imperfect signs. Household fires dim into red points of warmth. In room after room, human beings rest inside familiar walls, trusting the quiet promise that morning will arrive and ask the usual things of them. The temple roof is cool beneath your palm, though the air above the city remains warm. Below, lamps burn in courtyards and along narrow lanes, each flame enclosed within its own small circle of concern. From this height, human life becomes a low murmur, voices gathering and dissolving, a baby crying, a dog answering, a jar breaking somewhere with unfortunate clarity. To people, it is simply evening. To the gods of the old story, it may be something else entirely. The surviving Sumerian flood tablet does not tell you plainly why humankind must be destroyed. Its broken surface preserves the decision, but not the complete accusation. In the translation prepared through the University of Oxford's study of Sumerian literature, the divine verdict appears fixed and terrible. The seed of humanity is marked for destruction, and the ruling gods have spoken words that cannot be overturned, yet the reason has fallen away. There is a particular unease in a sentence of judgment without a charge. You are allowed to know that a decision has been made, but not what act made it necessary. Perhaps the missing lines once supplied a clear explanation. Perhaps they offered only a sacred mystery, something even the ancient listener was expected to accept without comfort. Across the rooftops, smoke rises from cooking fires and disappears into darkness. Somewhere, a family laughs over a clumsy remark. Somewhere else, an exhausted worker settles onto a mat without removing the dust from his feet. These lives seem too small to threaten a cosmic order. Their ambitions are mostly modest. They want food, children, shade, fairness, and a roof remaining upright through the rainy season. But the ancient imagination often sees humanity from another distance. People are not merely individuals in these stories. Together, they become a force, numerous, restless, demanding, and difficult to silence. Their fields spread, their canals cut into the plain, their ovens smoke, their animals multiply, their prayers rise with their complaints, their bodies require grain, water, land, and protection, day after day, generation after generation. The city is a human triumph, but perhaps also a divine irritation in a later Akkadian composition, known as the story of Atrahasis. Humanity becomes so numerous and noisy that the god Enlil cannot rest. The complaint sounds almost humorous at first. A great god, ruler of wind and authority, kept awake by noisy neighbours. Anyone who has lived beside an enthusiastic household may feel an unexpected flicker of sympathy. Then the humour fades. The noise is not simply shouting in a street. It suggests the unstoppable presence of human beings, their movement, hunger, work, birth, argument, ritual, and expansion. Humanity fills the earth with itself. The gods have an accepted human service. Discover that servants also have voices. They bring offerings, certainly, but they also bring disorder, pressure, and a sound that never entirely ends. You hear the city differently now. A grinding stone rasps before dawn, mallets fall upon wood, sheep call from pens, traders dispute over measures, children shout beside water jars, temple singers raise chants toward the sacred chambers. None of these sounds is wicked. Gathered together, however, they form a living tide, an insistence that the human world is no longer quiet or small. The later story imagines attempts to reduce that tide before destruction arrives. Disease comes, drought follows, hunger narrows faces and empties baskets. Each suffering is meant to reduce human abundance, yet humanity continues through divine assistance and stubborn survival. Finally, in that version, the flood is chosen as the terrible solution to a problem earlier punishments failed to solve. The older Sumerian fragment does not preserve this sequence. It would be careless to pretend it does. Still, the later account may reveal questions Mesopotamian listeners attached to the older silence. Why would powers who permit cities then decide against their inhabitants? Why grant grain, craft, family, music, and kingship, only to withdraw the entire human arrangement? Perhaps creation itself contains a tension. In Mesopotamian tradition, people may exist partly to relieve divine burdens, tending fields, preparing offerings, maintaining shrines, and providing ordered service. It is an uncomfortable idea, though hardly unfamiliar. Many human societies have also preferred labourers who work efficiently, remain grateful, and do not become troublesome. Divine management, it appears, may resemble earthly management more than anyone would like. A fringe interpretation pushes this discomfort much further. Some modern readers claim that the gods were not gods at all, but advanced beings who engineered humanity as a workforce, then attempted to remove their creation when it grew inconvenient. Such theories thrive in the spaces where tablets are damaged, because missing words can be dressed in almost any costume. The clay itself remains more restrained. Its world is religious, poetic, and fearful. Humanity belongs within divine order, yet humanity is never fully secure within it. The same powers who grant settlement and rule may also decide that the human term has ended. The story offers no courtroom where ordinary people defend themselves. There is no delegation of farmers asking what law they broke, no mother demanding why children must share a judgment they never chose. Only a decision descends. This is where scholars remain divided in emphasis. Some read the flood tradition chiefly as theology, exploring why ancient society imagined the gods as unpredictable keepers of order. Others see natural disaster behind the sacred language, with repeated river floods leaving memories of lives swept away without moral explanation. Perhaps a catastrophe without fairness eventually becomes a story about powers whose fairness cannot be understood. You look toward the river, invisible now beyond the sleeping roofs. Its sound is gentle, almost soothing, touching the banks with soft repetition. That is its most troubling quality. Destructive forces do not always announce themselves as enemies. Water brings crops, fish, clay, travel, drink, and coolness upon tired skin. A people may love what can also erase them. Perhaps the missing accusation was never the deepest point. Perhaps the fear lies in the belief that human beings may fulfill every ordinary expectation and still remain fragile. They may honour the sacred places, manage their stores, care for their children, and work beneath the heat. They may make noise because they are alive, and life itself in certain ancient stories may become too abundant for the order surrounding it. The lamps below begin to vanish one by one, a courtyard darkens, a workshop door closes, the last voices thin into the quiet breathing of households at rest. Nothing in the city's behaviour seems to justify extinction. That silence presses more heavily than any accusation could. Above the roofline, the stars remain cold and numerous. Beneath them, humanity sleeps inside a decision it has not heard and cannot appeal. The tablet offers judgment, but withholds the reason, leaving you beside the oldest unease of all, the possibility that a world can be condemned without ever understanding what it has done. A wall stands between the king and the voice that chooses to reach him. It is not a mountain cliff, nor a sealed bronze gate guarded by armed men. It is a wall within sacred space, built from ordinary brick, cool beneath the night air. Its plaster holds the faint smell of clay and smoke. Near its base, dust has gathered in a narrow line, disturbed only by sandals and the careful passing of temple servants. Ziusudra waits beside it. The voice does not address him in the easy manner of one person speaking openly to another. It speaks toward the wall, as though the wall itself possesses ears. The surviving Sumerian lines preserve this strange scene with startling clarity. A command is delivered to the barrier, while the listening king receives words intended for him without being openly named. Attend closely, take heed, listen. A flood will sweep across the land. The decision against humankind has been made. The words spoken by the divine assembly cannot be recalled. The command issued through the highest powers cannot be overturned. The time allotted to human rule has been cut short, and no petition rises strongly enough to restore it. The wall keeps every secret offered to it. You feel the rough surface beneath your fingertips, and the scene becomes strangely intimate. A voice passing through brick is quieter than a proclamation, yet more frightening. It suggests caution within the divine world itself. Someone is warning the king without publicly challenging the decree, slipping mercy through a narrow space in the machinery of destruction. Scholars reading the Oxford translation have long noticed this indirect form of communication. The text does not explain whether the wall conceals the speaker from other gods, protects the sacred nature of the message, or follows a storytelling habit familiar to ancient audiences. The ambiguity remains inside the room, as cool and silent as the bricks. Perhaps mercy must whisper when judgment has already spoken. Ziusudra does not have the luxury of demanding a clearer ceremony. A person informed of danger rarely receives information in the form he would prefer. There is no neatly sealed tablet handed to him with numbered instructions and an official apology for inconvenience. There is only a voice, a wall, a verdict, and the growing understanding that hearing must become action. He turns away from the sacred chamber into the sleeping city. Lamps shine faintly through doorways. A watchman leans upon his staff beside a storage building, fighting the heavy pull of his eyelids. In one courtyard, a woman has left a water jar covered for mourning. On a roof, a family rests beneath woven cloth, enjoying the slight coolness descending from the open sky. How does a ruler begin such a task? He cannot stand in the market and speak casually of universal destruction. A city depends upon trust, and panic can ruin a community almost as effectively as water. Fields still need tending, stores still require guards, boats still carry grain. People will not easily abandon homes because a king claims to have heard words spoken to a wall in darkness, yet he cannot remain motionless. Near the riverbank, reed bundles lie stacked in long yellow heaps. They are ordinary materials, cut from wetlands, dried beneath the sun, and carried into the city for countless purposes. Reeds become mats beneath sleeping bodies, fencing around small gardens, screens for privacy, baskets for carrying fish, and shelters for families living close to the water. They also become vessels. Along the waterways of southern Mesopotamia, boats can be made from bundled reeds, shaped carefully and sealed with black bitumen against leakage. Such craft are light enough for marsh channels and practical enough for daily work. They carry nets, jars, animals, reeds, grain, and people whose lives follow the twisting paths of water. Tonight, those familiar materials take on an unfamiliar weight. A bundle is no longer simply roofing. A length of cord is no longer merely cord. Bitumen, usually scraped and heated for repairs, suddenly becomes the dark skin of possible survival. Ziusudra walks among things his people have handled all their lives, while privately seeing them arranged toward a purpose no ordinary boatman would imagine. The surviving tablet breaks away at the cruelest moment. It preserves the warning beside the wall, then loses the instructions that must have followed. When the story becomes readable again, a huge boat already exists within the storming waters. The precise dimensions, labour, preparations, and decisions have vanished with the missing clay. Absence leaves its own picture. You imagine a secluded yard near a channel, screened by reed fencing and stacks of building material. Workers are summoned gradually, perhaps told that a large vessel is required for stores, livestock, temple property, or a journey connected with sacred duty. Their hands move with practiced assurance. They bind reeds, they tighten rope, they warm bitumen until its heavy smell clings to clothing and hair. One man jokes that no sensible ruler requires a boat quite so broad. Another replies that sensible rulers rarely ask labourers for advice. A third says nothing, because he has noticed the seriousness in the officials overseeing the work. Gentle sarcasm fades quickly when powerful men stop smiling. The boat grows slowly. Its curved body rests beside dark water. Strange in scale, familiar in material, reeds bend together, each stalk fragile alone, stronger when bound into thickness. Pitches spread into seams. Baskets arrive. Jars are counted. Food must be dry, portable, protected from dampness, and sufficient for a need nobody wishes to describe too plainly. The king understands a difficult truth. A vessel cannot hold a city. No construction, however carefully prepared, can receive every hand that shaped its streets. There are too many families, too many animals, too many jars, too many children sleeping beneath roofs warmed by generations of use. The message carried through the wall offers a passage through ruin. but it does not offer comfort equal to the lives left outside that passage. A fringe telling sometimes imagines the boat as a machine of forgotten sophistication, a sealed craft preserving secret knowledge from an advanced age. The old clay is less interested in machinery than in obedience. Its great vessel belongs to water, labour, animals, provisions, and the fearful duty of a man who acts upon a warning he cannot make fair. The strange miracle is not technology, it is burden. As darkness deepens, the vessel takes shape beneath wavering torchlight. Black sealant shines upon bundled reeds. Workmen wipe sticky hands against old cloth. A supervisor checks bindings with a touch firm enough to betray anxiety. Near the water, frogs call among the plants, entirely unconcerned with divine assemblies or royal secrets, as Yasudra stands beside the unfinished craft. The scent of heated pitch settles heavily around him, mixed with river mud and cut reed stems. He can hear the city beyond the yard, its evening sounds softened by walls and distance. A song rises briefly from a household, then fades. Someone laughs. A gate closes. He knows what the city does not. Behind him rests the wall that received the whisper. Before him rests a vessel becoming real beneath human hands. Between them stands a king whose obedience may preserve a small breathing remnant, yet cannot explain why such preservation should be necessary. The river touches the bank with gentle, repetitive sounds. It has carried fishing boats, offerings, grain shipments, and children learning to balance beneath an adult's anxious gaze. Now, beside that same familiar water, reeds are bound into a shape meant for an unthinkable purpose. No public alarm disturbs the night. Only the quiet scraping of tools continues, and the dark vessel grows beside the sleeping city, built from the same marsh reeds that have always served human life, while a secret spoken through brick begins to take its final earthly form. Rain does not fall here in generous curtains for long months. The plain receives most of its living water from rivers, channels, and the patient human labour required to guide them. Yet when a river breaks its familiar path, the result can be sudden, ebenous, and strangely clean. A lane vanishes beneath brown water, a storeroom dissolves at its base, a courtyard disappears beneath silt. The earth remembers such moments differently from a poem. You stand upon the mound of Telfera while morning wind moves dust across its surface. The city is gone from sight, pressed into layered soil beneath your feet. There are no rising walls complete enough to shelter you, no bustling quay, no open temple door. Instead, broken pottery glints among grains of sand, and low contours betray buried rooms. In 1931, an expedition connected with the University of Pennsylvania and the American Schools of Oriental Research returned to this mound. The director, Erich Schmidt, opened trenches through occupation layers that had accumulated over generations. Archaeology requires a particular kind of patience, because a city does not reveal itself as a story. It reveals flaws, ashes, bricks, fragments, and stains. Schmidt's workers cut downward through remains associated with thriving urban life. Their tools uncovered pottery, tablets, ceilings, walls, and rubbish left by inhabitants who had no intention of becoming evidence. Then the texture changed. A deposit of river-laid material separated an older level of settlement from the urban activity resting above it. The layer did not speak in words. It was sediment, laid down by inundation, lying between cultural horizons. Beneath it were remains associated with the closing part of the late prehistoric urban age, commonly called the Jemdet Nasr period. Above it appeared material belonging to the opening phases of the early dynastic world, when Sumerian cities grew into increasingly visible political communities. The date usually considered for this inundation is near 2900 BC, centuries earlier than the date often used for the fully developed city life remembered in many surviving tablets. It is not a perfect match for every literary calculation, nor does it need to be. Tradition is not a calendar written by a surveyor. It gathers, reshapes, and preserves what community cannot quite forget. You kneel beside the imagined trench wall, where differences in colour reveal separate deposits. Ordinary occupation soil is crowded with charcoal, broken pots, small debris, ash, bits of brick, and traces of people making a mess of their own homes. Flood-laid silt appears quieter, less cluttered, deposited by moving water rather than by cooking, building, discarding, and repairing. It is a silence made visible. A flood layer can indicate severe local destruction, but it cannot declare that every city on Earth vanished beneath one rising ocean. Archaeologists have found flood deposits at several Mesopotamian sites, yet they do not all belong to one identical event. Rivers changed course repeatedly across the plain. Different communities could endure different disasters, separated by decades or centuries. This is where measured evidence matters. A layer of silt confirms water reached a place with destructive force. It does not identify a divine speaker, a warned king, or a vessel rocking upon endless waves. Those belong to narrative memory, theology, and the long human wish to understand why familiar ground sometimes becomes hostile. Still, the coincidence is difficult to ignore completely. Among all the cities named in the old flood tradition, Shuruppak is the home assigned to the surviving ruler. Within that same ancient settlement, excavators found material evidence of a serious inundation at a deep and formative point in the city's history. The discovery does not prove the entire story. It does give the story a landscape that knew destructive water intimately. The river plain around you once behaved with restless freedom. The Euphrates did not remain obediently confined within engineered banks. Channels shifted, levees breached, water spread across fields, entered compounds, and deposited mud wherever its force weakened. A farmer might wake to find an irrigation blessing transformed into an argument with the universe. You picture the first signs within an occupied settlement. Water appears where it should not be, gathering at the edge of a field or moving too quickly through a minor channel. Men walk toward it with tools, confident that familiar measures will suffice. Bundled reeds are placed. Earth is carried in baskets. Instructions are shouted through wind and splashing water. Then the river answers with greater weight. Walls made from mud brick are strong enough in dry weather, but relentless water softens their lower courses. Plaster darkens. Bricks sag. A wall that sheltered generations can slump into a courtyard with a heavy wet collapse. Grain stored too close to the floor spoils quickly. Fires die. Animals strain at ropes. People gather jars, children a cloth, and anything portable. The most frightening part may be the speed with which possessions lose meaning. A carved object, a good jar, a loom weight, a tablet, a mat carefully woven through long evenings, all become burdens once water rises above the knees. Human hands choose life first, even while the heart protests the abandonment of everything that made life recognizable. Among the flood deposits of ancient Mesopotamia, enthusiasts have occasionally searched for proof of a single worldwide catastrophe. The old soil does not offer that certainty. Instead, it presents several floods in several cities, each belonging to the dangerous life of the river basin. Reality is less tidy than legend, and perhaps more moving because of that. The scholarly debate remains delicate. Some researchers suggest that an exceptional inundation at Shuruppak, or a cluster of severe regional floods, helped shape the cultural memory preserved in flood literature. Others caution that written stories may have taken form through religious and literary traditions whose relationship to any single deposit cannot be demonstrated securely. Both positions respect the evidence. Neither requires the mud to perform miracles. A recent geological study of flooding at another ancient Sumerian city, Lagash, has renewed attention to how abruptly waterways could devastate urban spaces in southern Iraq. The work reinforces a wider reality visible across this landscape. Rivers did not merely support the cities of Mesopotamia, they periodically cut through them, rearranging streets, buildings, and human expectations. One strange feature of excavation is that destruction can preserve what peaceful years scatter. When walls collapse and mud seals a floor, objects may remain where people dropped or abandoned them. A disaster becomes an unwelcome archivist. The same water that ends a household's ordered life may protect its broken traces long enough for strangers to touch them thousands of years afterward. Your fingers hover over the silty band in the trench face. It is pale, plain, and without emotion. It carries no image of frightened faces, no sound of animals, no smell of soaked grain, no prayer raised above rushing water. Yet it represents a day, or several terrible days, when a settled place encountered a force stronger than its walls. Beyond the mound, the modern plain stretches into heat. The ancient river channel is no longer a bright path beside crowded houses. Wind passes through open ground where boats once unloaded supplies and children once ran beside courtyards. The city's material life lies beneath layers of human building and river interruption, each resting upon the other in quiet succession. The old account remembers water as a boundary between worlds. Archaeology finds water as a band within earth. One speaks through kings, divine judgment, and survival. The other speaks through silt, broken architecture, and altered occupation. They are not the same voice, but neither is entirely silent beside the other. As evening cools the mound, the trench shadows deepen. Dust settles upon exposed surfaces. A small shard of pottery catches the last light, then dulls into brown earth once more. Beneath it rests the river's ancient signature, a thin buried hush left by water crossing through human order. You stand above that quiet layer, listening to wind move over the emptied plain. No final answer rises from the soil, only the sober knowledge that Shruppak was real, its flood was real, and somewhere between destruction and remembrance, people placed the experience into a story strong enough to endure when their walls could not. Clay does not speak with one voice forever. A story pressed into it may be copied, translated, shortened, expanded, polished, questioned, and carried into rooms far removed from the hands that first shaped it. The flood survivor enters this long journey quietly, leaving one name behind and gathering others as centuries pass across Mesopotamia. You sit inside a scribal chamber where afternoon light reaches through a high opening. Tablets dry upon wooden shelves. A young copyist holds a damp rectangle of clay upon his palm, listening as an older teacher recites lines in a language of learning and memory. Outside, carts creak through dust. Inside, an ancient disaster is being preserved one careful wedge at a time. The Sumerian tablet kept by the University of Pennsylvania Museum calls the survivor Ziusudra. Its script belongs to the 17th century before our era, though the tradition it preserves reaches into a far older imagined world. The king receives warning, survives overwhelming waters, offers sacrifice, and is granted life in a distant sacred place. Yet stories rarely remain still. Another poem, composed in Akkadian rather than Sumerian, gives the survivor a different name, Atrahasis, meaning exceedingly wise. His tale is broader in scale, beginning not with the final crisis alone, but with the burdens of the gods, the creation of human workers, the growth of human society, and a sequence of punishments ending in destructive water. The British Museum preserves an old Babylonian tablet from this Atrahasis tradition, dated to the reign of King Amisaduqa in the 17th century before our era. Its age places it close to the surviving Sumerian flood tablet, yet its literary world is more expansive, more argumentative, and more interested in explaining why human existence becomes a problem. You hear the change in tone. Ziusudra feels almost like a figure glimpsed through incense smoke, reverent and distant, receiving a terrible sacred secret. Atrahasis is defined by cleverness and endurance. His world examines the uneasy arrangement between divine employers and human labourers. His survival belongs not merely to obedience, but to intelligence within a creation already strained by its own success. Perhaps listeners recognise themselves in him. A wise person in any age knows that powerful authorities often create difficulties, and then act surprised when those difficulties become inconvenient. Mesopotamian storytelling offers many gods worthy of worship, but it does not always spare them from looking remarkably like difficult managers. A scribe lifts his stylus, pauses, and alters a damaged sign. He is not inventing the flood anew. He is participating in a tradition that remains alive because it can change. Names shift, speeches grow longer, divine motives receive fuller explanation. A remembered catastrophe enters different literary vessels, each shaped for the concerns of its own audience. Centuries continue to pass. In the great epic of Gilgamesh, the survivor appears once more, now named Utnapishtim. He no longer stands at the centre of a tale beginning with city foundations or human creation. Instead, he waits at the far end of another man's grief. Gilgamesh, broken by the death of his beloved companion, travels in search of escape from mortality. The journey leads him to the flood survivor. You imagine the scene beside distant waters, where the weary king of Uruk faces a man who has crossed the boundary no mortal expects to cross. Utnapishtim possesses the impossible prize Gilgamesh desires enduring life beyond ordinary human limits. Yet his immortality is not a method available for copying. It arose from an exceptional disaster and a singular divine decision. He tells his story because Gilgamesh asks how death may be avoided. The answer is strangely disappointing. There is no reliable road, no hidden formula, no royal privilege strong enough to defeat the final human condition. A man once survived a flood and received extraordinary life, but his experience cannot become a general escape route for anxious kings. That is a profound change in purpose. The flood tradition now serves a meditation on mortality. The vessel, the storm, the landing, the offering, and the divine gift remain recognizable, but they are framed by grief. Water no longer threatens humanity only as a population. It becomes part of a conversation with one man who cannot bear that love has ended in loss. The most famous tablet carrying this version rests in the British Museum. It is tablet 11 of the standard Babylonian epic of Gilgamesh, recovered from the Royal Library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh. Written many centuries after the oldest surviving flood compositions, it preserves Utnapishtim's account with details whose rhythm still grips the modern imagination. In 1872, a self-taught scholar named George Smith recognised the flood account while studying tablet fragments at the British Museum. He had begun life professionally as an apprentice in banknote engraving, not as a grand professor descending marble steps. Yet his ability to read broken cuneiform allowed a buried literary world to enter Victorian public life with startling force. There is a wonderfully human report that Smith became almost uncontrollably excited upon recognising what he had read. The calm museum room apparently did not remain entirely calm. One can hardly blame him. After many centuries of silence, a survivor was speaking again through blackened clay fragments, and he sounded unexpectedly familiar to readers raised upon another flood tradition. Still, familiarity must not be confused with simplicity. The Sumerian Ziusudra poem, the Akkadian Atrahasis epic, and the Gilgamesh account share essential patterns: divine decision, secret warning, survival through a vessel, devastating water, sacrifice, and transformed human existence. Yet they are not merely identical copies wearing different names. Each version selects, rearranges, and deepens the flood according to its own purpose. One tradition places the survivor amid humanity's earliest cities. Another asks why humankind was made and why its numbers became unbearable to the gods. Another brings the survivor into the path of a grieving hero who seeks everlasting life. Memory remains recognizable, but its meaning shifts like river channels across the plain. Specialists continue to weigh the relationship among these compositions. Some consider the Sumerian narrative an independent expression of flood memory that influenced later scribal writing. Others caution that the surviving tablets are only fragments from a far larger web of oral and written traditions, many of which have vanished completely. The family resemblance is unmistakable. The exact family tree remains uncertain. You look again at the scribe's shelf. There are no printing presses, no digital archives, no guaranteed copies stored beyond fire, war, dampness, theft, or neglect. A composition survives because people continue choosing to write it. Every surviving tablet implies other tablets lost, other performances forgotten, other versions crumbled into soil before anyone could read them again. Perhaps a missing tablet once gave the survivor another name. Perhaps a village singer described the flood without kings or immortal gifts, remembering only boats tearing free from their moorings and families searching for higher ground. Perhaps temple scholars gave sacred architecture to memories that ordinary people carried as fear, warning, and grief. The written remains offer precious light, but not the whole landscape. Evening enters the scribal room. A teacher covers completed tablets with cloth. The young copyist stretches stiff fingers and inspects his final lines, hoping they are accurate enough to avoid correction. On the shelf, Ziusudra, Atrahasis, and Utnapishtim seem almost to stand together, 3 names carried upon the same dark water. Outside, the canals reflect the first stars. Stories move as rivers do, dividing, joining, disappearing beneath silt, then returning in another course. A survivor steps from one tablet into another, not unchanged, yet never wholly lost. His city, his warning, and his terrible crossing remain alive because generations continue to ask what it means for a human being to endure when the familiar world gives way. The dawn sky above south-central Iraq opens in colours of pearl, sand, and faint rose. Beneath it, the plain appears almost impossibly broad, a quiet expanse where distance seems to dissolve into heat. A vehicle leaves a modern road and follows a rougher track, raising a pale plume behind it. You feel dust settle upon your skin before the ancient mound comes fully into view. It does not look like a city at first. Tel Farah lies low against the horizon, an uneven rise of earth shaped by weather, abandonment, excavation, and the weight of buried buildings. No pyramid lifts above it. No great stone gateway announces a royal past. It is a swelling of brown ground within a level landscape, easy to overlook unless you already know what sleeps beneath its surface. Here stood Shuruppak. The name belongs not merely to a literary world of divine decisions and surviving kings. It belongs to a real place in modern Iraq, south of Nippur, on land once touched by an ancient course of the Euphrates. The river no longer presents itself beside the mound as it did to the inhabitants. Yet its absence does not erase the city's position. Water shaped this settlement long before dust concealed it. You walk slowly across the mound, where pottery fragments lie among pebbles and hardened soil. Each piece has lost its vessel, its contents, and the hand that once lifted it. Still, the fragments announce habitation everywhere. Bowls broke here, jars rested here. Meals were prepared, grain stored, beer poured, and water carried through doorways whose walls now blend into the earth. The site extends across a broad area, formed from more than one elevated portion with the line of an old watercourse passing between them. This arrangement gives the ground a faint, almost unreadable structure. A channel once divided parts of the settlement, guiding boats or draining water while neighbourhoods gathered on either side. What seems empty begins to take shape under patient attention. The ancient city did not sit beside a river accidentally. A river meant transport, irrigation, fish, reeds, clay, communication, and danger. Goods could arrive from other communities without struggling overland through the full cruelty of summer heat. Barley, wool, pottery, timber, stone, bitumen, and messages moved along waterways that functioned like the living roads of the plain. At the river's edge, a quay may once have received boats rocking beneath their cargo. Modern investigations using magnetic survey have detected evidence interpreted as a harbour and quay at the site, alongside portions of a city wall overlooked by older excavation. The discovery offers an unusually vivid glimpse of Shuruppak as a connected urban place, shaped by movement as much as by memory. You stand where a boatman might have steadied his vessel with one foot pressed into wet earth. He carries sacks upward towards storehouses, muttering about the sun, the mud, and whoever decided the load should be his responsibility. Nearby, officials check deliveries. A child watches fish flash within a basket. A dog hopes that administrative oversight will remain imperfect. The city breathes again for a moment. European explorers began examining Farah during the 19th and early 20th centuries, when ancient southern Iraq drew scholars eager to locate the cities named in cuneiform writings. Excavation was far rougher then than modern archaeology would permit. Trenches cut deeply across the mound, seeking tablets, walls, and objects that might reveal the site's identity. Among those early discoveries were inscriptions naming Shuruppak, confirming that Tel Fair was not merely one ancient settlement among many. It was the place whose old name survived in literary tradition. Clay signs, pressed by inhabitants thousands of years earlier, restored a word to the landscape. The mound could be addressed again, not only as Earth, but as a city. In 1931, excavations directed by Erich Schmidt for the University of Pennsylvania Museum and the American Schools of Oriental Research examined its occupation layers with renewed care. Tablets and architectural remains helped reconstruct a settlement active from the late prehistoric age into the periods when early city government, record-keeping, and economic organization became deeply established across Sumer. The pen excavators found the city divided by time beneath their feet. Lower remains belonged to an earlier phase. Later occupation rested above, richer in the evidence of increasingly complex urban life. Between levels lay traces of inundation, the physical mark of water entering the human record without asking permission from poets, priests, or kings. Yet Tel Farah offers more than a dramatic association with water. It preserves the busy mind of an early city. The tablets recovered there include accounts, legal materials, lists, and school texts. They reveal people classifying goods, distributing rations, managing responsibilities, teaching signs, and placing everyday life into the small rectangular discipline of clay. One especially important feature of Shurupak's tablets is their connection with early Scrabble learning. Lists of words and objects appear among the finds, showing how young writers learned to organize their world. Imagine a room full of students copying terms for tools, animals, containers, and professions, while outside their teacher's entire city waits to be misclassified by an unsteady hand. There is something gently amusing about locating a solemn legendary city through exercises and receipts. A place associated with the ending of humanity's first age is also preserved through schoolwork, ration accounts, and bureaucratic detail. Apparently, even a city carrying immense symbolic weight must still record who received barley and who misplaced a tablet. The mound also bears scars belonging to modern times. Looting has damaged parts of the surface, with holes disturbing deposits that might once have preserved rooms, ceilings, and fragile associations between objects. Archaeologists do not search only for impressive artifacts. They search for relationships: which object lay beside which wall, within which layer, near which doorway, belonging to which period. When those relationships are destroyed, knowledge vanishes quietly. Some fringe seekers have imagined that Tel Farah must conceal proof of a secret vessel, a hidden chamber, or the material trace of a lost population rescued from destruction. The Earth has yielded no such certainty. Its revelations are more modest and more reliable houses, tablets, seal impressions, ancient channels, public structures, and evidence of a city deeply entangled with water. Scholars still debate the exact organization of its neighborhoods, harbor spaces, public authority, and economic institutions during its greatest periods. Survey reveals patterns beneath the soil, while excavation offers smaller windows opened carefully into those patterns. The complete city remains unrecovered, not because it is unreal, but because ancient urban landscapes are complex, damaged, and vast. The afternoon light grows warmer upon the mound. From its higher ground, You look over fields stretching toward a distant haze. There is no bright Euphrates flowing beneath the city wall now. Its former channel has shifted into the archaeology of landscape, mapped through soil, elevation, ancient beds, and the buried logic of settlement. Still, the location feels exact. A city of reeds, grain, tablets, shrines, boats, and families once stood upon this rise. Its people faced an active river, trusting it, working beside it, and fearing it when its mood changed. Their name for their home survived through writing, their streets survived through buried outlines. Their world rests beneath dust, but it has not disappeared into fantasy. As dusk approaches, the mound becomes dark against an amber sky. Wind brushes softly over fragments of pottery, old trench edges, and the faint lines of watercourses no longer filled. You are standing where Shurupak stood, upon the real earth of a remembered city, while the plain settles into silence around you. The place offers no loud revelation. It does something quieter. It takes a name carried through ancient fear and gives it soil, distance, riverbanks, broken bowls, and the enduring shape of human habitation. Beneath the altered sky of Iraq, Tel Farah remains, a low and patient witness to the city that clay refused to let vanish.